All right, welcome to another Insider Notebook here at Bleacher Report. James Palmer with you as always. Usually we do this on Wednesday, but we have a holiday this week. Not sure if you know. If you don't, make sure you get your shopping done or do it online. They'll still get some stuff there before Christmas. So we're going to talk for the next half hour, like we do each and every week, about the ongoings of the NFL. You can always interact with me right here on the Microsoft Copilot. I will answer your questions in between each and every one of the topics we go through today, and I try to get to as many as I can. And some people say you skip over them. No, we don't skip over anybody. We try to read all of them. We try to get information on all of them and see how much we can tell you about what's going on within the NFL. Our topics today, obviously, coaches on the hot seats. They're getting that time of year where we're going to talk about maybe some of the openings that end up kind of coming about. We already have two. What could be some other openings in terms of head coaches across the NFL? We'll start with that. That's a pretty juicy topic. We'll get to Tua Tagovailoa and Mike McDaniel and what's going on there in Miami. It's kind of part of it, but it's its own little thing. And what's going on with the numbers and Tua and what's his future in Miami. Also, some of the injuries that are going on. Lamar Jackson, his health obviously huge to the Ravens as they cling to just a small chance of the postseason now, which is a disappointing season there in Baltimore. Josh Allen, latest there. What's also going on with maybe a rookie running back in Cleveland that has been having a very, very good season, and what his timetable to return would be. Also, who stays put? There's two coordinators I have my eye on right now because their contracts are expiring, and what their movement or lack thereof movement could mean for both those organizations and maybe some other things within the NFL. Also, some playoff scenarios. The AFC is still bananas, still wide open. Like the Jaguars can get the number one seed, but also still can't win their division just yet and could lose their division. Same thing with the Broncos. It's just wild in the AFC, but we'll go through some of that and where teams stand as they push towards the postseason. So we already have a couple here. Bolt up, by the way. Chargers very quietly just playing some really, really good football. They have an opportunity. I'll just say this off the top since I saw the chat and I told you I'll always get to it. They have a chance that they could win the AFC West over Denver in that game in Week 18 if Week 17 kind of falls a certain way. Okay, let's go to the coaching cycle of what's happening right now. And this is kind of what I've been doing with a lot of the stuff I've been working on over the last couple of weeks. Is I talk to a lot of coaches who are potentially candidates. They're very curious. They're doing their work on how many openings they think there will be in this head coaching cycle. We already have two, as I mentioned. The Titans is already an opening, and they're already doing a lot of work in terms of the candidates that they're looking at. The Giants is already an opening, and they already have their list together, which is a pretty wide-ranging list to my understanding. It's just a different year, though, and I wanted to mention that. It's a different year when it comes to what's available. And this is the part I want to say at the top before I get to the specific teams. There is not a Ben Johnson right now in terms of there's a coordinator out there that we are guaranteed if he wants one, he will get one of the jobs. That's the way it's been with him. Same thing with Mike Vrabel. Everybody was kind of assuming this year he was going to get one of the jobs if he wants one. That's not the field this year when you ask around the NFL, that there's just a surefire, can't miss candidate that will get one of the jobs if he wants one. That's not really in this cycle unless. What all of these candidates I'm talking to are curious about is really 3 or 4 teams and those coaches if they become available. Say, and they'll never fire Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh, but if Tomlin wants to part ways and they discuss that and he becomes available, it changes the landscape. John Harbaugh in Baltimore, with as bad as the season's gone, if Steve Bisciotti, their owner, decides to move on from John Harbaugh after all this time, 18, 19 years, that changes the landscape of what this cycle would be. The other one would be Sean McDermott in Buffalo or Kevin Stefanski in Cleveland. Now, I would say out of all of them, the most likely of candidates to become available would probably be Kevin Stefanski with the Browns. So let's start there. As I ask around the NFL, it's really this. If Kevin Stefanski becomes available, there's a very good chance he would be the most marketable candidate in this head coaching cycle. There are many people around the league that I talk to that believe a change of scenery, different quarterback situation, different ownership group, a variety of things. Kevin Stefanski would be a highly sought after head coaching candidate if he became available. Now, there's a lot going on in Cleveland. You have to remember what they did. They gave up that second overall pick, didn't take Travis Hunter, let the Jaguars come up and get that, got more draft capital. They have 2 ones next year. You would think that with that move and passing on a quarterback at 2 or passing on Travis Hunter at 2, that there was a thought that Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski would be certainly part of what they were trying to build in 2026 off of this rookie class that is very, very good. but they also have gone through a lot of different changes. What's gone there? Paul DiPodesto has left, who was there for a long time. And so there could be a lot of things looked at by Jimmy Haslam in terms of what could transpire in Cleveland. But I'll just say this. That's the buzz right now around Kevin Stefanski. Now, go to Zach Taylor. We'll stay in the state. It's funny because I ran into Marvin Lewis actually at the game between the Broncos and the Jaguars, and the Cincinnati Bengals just do not really like to pay coaches to not coach for them. They don't like to make trades in season very often. They don't like to do things really outside of their organization in terms of how they handle a lot of their coaches. There was a lot of buzz about Zach Taylor having 1 year left on his contract after this season. That's not the case. He actually has 2 years remaining on his contract after this season, and I think that's a big factor when you look at the way the Cincinnati Bengals do business. And you also look at the way his side of the ball has performed. When they lost Joe Burrow, and these injuries play a part in the evaluation process by Paul Brown. So when you look at losing Joe Burrow for the time period he did, he brings in Joe Flacco, and the stretch that Flacco was the starter, they were still one of the best offenses in football. Could they maybe move on from Al Golden and move defensive coordinators once again? That's certainly a possibility, but it looks more likely than not that Zach Taylor stays with the Cincinnati Bengals because it's just how they do business. He's taken them to a Super Bowl. He's taken them to an AFC Championship game. Joe Burrow likes playing in that offense. And so I just think there's much more likely chance that Zach Taylor stays in place. I think Pete Carroll, as I ask around the NFL, the growing sentiment from people outside of Las Vegas is that this might be a one and done situation with Pete Carroll. I have heard from multiple coaches that are friends with coaches that are in that building that it is a mess. There are a lot of things going on in that building and a lot of things that need to be sorted out. They've already fired their special teams coordinator. They've already fired their offensive coordinator. There's not too many more people you can let go when you put together this staff that they had. And you had the highest paid offensive coordinator in the NFL in Chip Kelly. You've moved on from both of them. Pete Carroll wanted a quick turnaround. This roster, if we're being honest, was not worthy of a very quick turnaround. And so where do they go from here? The questions I'm being asked from other coaches is, does Mark Davis want to pay another coaching staff? Well, he does have an added influx of money with the portions of the organization that he sold off to Tom Brady and his group, which brings in a lot of actual liquid cash that you would need to have if you're going to pay another coaching staff. The other part that's being asked about the Raiders organization, and I think this is worth bringing up, is everybody's curious what Tom Brady is going to do. Is he going to go all in and make himself a part of what they're trying to build? It's kind of like in a lot of people's minds around the league that he's half in and he's half out. Is he going to go all in and help make these changes? I know he's played a big part and has a big voice in that building in terms of, what they do at the quarterback position moving forward, what they do with Pete Carroll, all of these things. I think everybody has an eye on Tom Brady if they end up moving on for Pete Carroll, what his role is, because he went hard after Ben Johnson and wanted to bring in Ben Johnson, lost out on him to Chicago and ends up bringing in Pete Carroll. But the growing sentiment is that Pete might be done in Las Vegas when I talk to certain people. Also, I mentioned the Giants, where they're at in their list. The Titans, they're already there. The Dolphins have already fired their general manager. They're still in a hunt for their GM. The Falcons is a team that I'm hearing more and more buzz about right now with where they stand with Raheem Morris. I think guys love coaching for him. I think players love playing for him. I just think things have not transpired very quickly. The Michael Penix move that they had extremely high expectations for at the start of this season just haven't really fully transpired. They had a really good win last Thursday night. They get another win, over Arizona, who's down with a million injuries. But that's a spot that I'm hearing around the league that more and more people believe could be more likely a change than one staying pat. I think they're analyzing everything within that building from Terry Fontenot on down and see where they go moving forward from here. I mentioned their win over the Cardinals. The Cardinals are definitely a team a lot of people have an eye on. I think Michael Bidwell really, really likes Jonathan Gannon and his young coaching staff. He's improved each and every year that he's been there. He inherited a very bad situation. He went from 4 wins to 8 and 9. He never really had the quarterback that he desired. He inherited Kyler Murray. It looks like Murray might have played his final snaps in Arizona. Do they allow Jonathan Gannon to stay there with his young coaching staff and the general manager that he's put in place with Monty Ossenfort, and how they, in a lot of people's minds, built this the right way? They went and go get the left tackle. They go and get the star receiver. They're kind of building a team in a proper way. They have maybe the best tight end in all of football. Man, the injuries have been a big part of that. They lose a couple of more guys. Nolan goes down, he gets carted off. Wilson has the Achilles. Marvin Harrison's been banged up. And I think that may play a factor in how this evaluation goes with Jonathan Gannon. But there are some people that think this could almost be 50-50. I don't think a decision has been made, but I think that's one we definitely have to continue to monitor. Maybe there's a chance they want to see Jonathan Gannon bring in his own quarterback. And what could him and Drew Petzing, their offensive coordinator, and everybody there do with the quarterback of their choice? We'll see. I think the Commanders, I think Dan Quinn is staying, but I do think they're going to evaluate everything. This is a roster that needs to be flipped. I think the Chiefs, I think Andy Reid is staying, but it's a team to keep an eye on about their assistants, and we'll get to that and where they are in terms of making changes. I've always been told, and just put this out there, I don't think Andy Reid's ever going to do some big song and dance. My understanding always was when he thinks it's time, he's just going to let the organization know, and he's going to hang it up. That's kind of just how it will probably go down with Andy Reid, not some big retirement tour. If anybody knows Andy, it's probably not something he would be interested in. I keep an eye on Tampa. I'm not saying Todd Bowles is out. He got the contract extension a little while ago, but they won 3 division titles. They started 5-1. They were a Super Bowl contender. Baker was an MVP candidate, and now they've lost 7 of 9, and they do not control their own fate within that division right now after losing this game to Carolina. They're much more talented than Carolina, let's be honest. I think Carolina is just a hotter team right now, and this is not, that's ownership always keeps an eye on how you respond to certain things. And we saw a very different Todd Bowles after that embarrassing loss to the Falcons, cursing a galore and everything, and they respond with that performance and end up losing again. I think we do keep an eye on the Tampa Bay, and I think they do evaluate some things there. So that's kind of where all of those different ones lie. Before I get to Tua, I know that was a lengthy kind of topic. I know this, I could see out of the corner of my eye, everything was going on there. Who's the next Giants head coach? I do think Giants is going to be very, very interesting. I think there are some candidates on the defensive side of the ball that could pair themselves with a young offensive mind for, say, Jackson Dart. A name that I would think of would be somebody like Davis Webb. He's in Denver there. He's kind of blocked to be the offensive coordinator as Joe Lombardi's the OC, and we know Sean Payton's the play caller. But man, what I hear about Davis Webb around the NFL in terms of how bright he is, how he works with quarterbacks, he has ties to the Giants. Say they bring in a defensive-minded head coach that has experience. I think the Giants are looking at a lot of guys that have been a head coach before. If you're on the defensive side of the ball, why not bring in somebody like Davis Webb to work with Jackson Dart? I think if they do go with one of those experienced guys or one of those guys on that side of the ball, I think who they do bring in for Dart is extremely important. It's a borderline paramount to what you do with your hiring process. Are they looking at probably somebody like Marcus Freeman? Certainly. Are they looking at these other guys that are, on that defensive side, whether it's Steve Spagnuolo or Lou Anarumo or any of those type of guys? Like, I think they are. I think some experience might be what they're looking for as well, but we'll see. But that's just kind of what I was thinking in terms of that side of the ball. Let's see. There's a lot of back here. Let's go through some of these chats because, man, it hopped on there. So, Arthur Blank, please get Raheem Morris out of here. I kind of mentioned Raheem. John Harbaugh, just to clarify where it's at with Harbaugh, I always think certain things come into play. Expectations are always a big part of it. They were literally for a lot of people, a Super Bowl pick. Remember, he does not report to anybody other than ownership. He does not report to Eric DeCosta, the general manager. He reports to Steve Bisciotti. That's it. Bisciotti doesn't talk to anybody really. So if you're hearing any rumors about John and his status, I would say take those with a grain of salt because Steve Bisciotti doesn't really speak publicly. He doesn't really, entertain rumors in a sense. This could be one of those situations where it might be just time. And what John Harbaugh does next would be fascinating. But I do think that's one that I would just kind of keep an eye on. It says, what about Shane? I see that. Is that Steichen, I think? There was a lot of people, by the way, this past weekend that thought Shane Steichen coached his tail off in that loss that they had, that last second loss that they had with Phillip Rivers playing his first game. I think Shane is safe. I kind of, have always, been curious when ownership changes, what it would be like. Because obviously it's not Jim Irsay making the decision. It wasn't, Carly did not hire Shane Steichen. So you're always curious what those would be. What a start. This would be one of the biggest collapses, but there's a lot of reasons why this collapse certainly happened there. Bring Jesse Minter back to Baltimore as a head coach. I think Jesse's definitely a head coaching candidate. I think Jeff Hafley's also one of those guys that's maybe one of those young defensive coordinators that's a head coaching candidate. I think Chris Shula in LA is definitely one that some teams are going to take a look at as well. What else? Harbaugh needs to leave. We see that. Tomlin isn't getting fired. I'll say this right here. Tomlin will never really get fired. I think they'll just mutually agree to part ways whenever that does come to an end. But they kind of look like a playoff team, you know? They look like they stopped the run. Derek Harmon playing. There's always a big thing for them. I mentioned Pete. What you got here? That's what he's saying in the video. Oh, it's me on the video. Todd Bowles, he needs out of Tampa. That's an interesting one. I just said is kind of an interesting thing to keep an eye on. Shane Steichen, I think you keep an eye on it there. Man, if I'm Philadelphia, by the way, and Shane becomes available, I'm bringing him back as OC. Like, no, I mean, big time. Cleveland needs a new head coach. I was talking with some other coaches the other day who were going, it almost feels like Kevin's trying to get fired to get a new situation. I obviously, if anybody knows Kevin Stefanski, he's not trying to do that, but that's just kind of the situation that they're in there in Cleveland. What else we got here? And these kind of jump on top of each other when I fly through them. Wow, there's a lot in here. Joe Shane. Joe Shane is out as GM. I'll say this, because of what's going on with ownership, maybe John Mara's health, I think there's a greater chance that Joe Shane stays because of his assistance to help look for that head coach. I know it's his list. That's a big part of what they're looking for with the Giants and where that stands. And so keep an eye on Joe for sure. I know everybody can look back at Jacksonville a year ago and go, well, Trent Baalke was there, and then Trent Baalke was out, and they landed Liam Cohen, who might be coach of the year. Anything's possible. I just think right now there's a greater chance that that Joe Shane stays. Shane's a great coach. I actually agree. I think Shane Steichen's an outstanding coach. This is a question, but I can't see what did the QB situation in Atlanta? Is Cousins the future? I mean, man, they were pretty certain that he didn't have much left at the end of last season. So it's been fascinating to see Kirk play the way he's playing. But if anybody knows the way he's wired, I'm not surprised. I think they still need it to be Penix, but we'll see when he can come back from another ACL. That's a huge issue. Does San Francisco regret Purdy contract and the year he's had? I think he's played pretty well of late. They believe his mobility's kind of come back and he's kind of playing a little bit better more recently. And they believe actually some people in that building, he can carry us through this postseason. They clinched a playoff spot. You know, I think that's a kudos to what's going on there. Lions coordinators, I think Kelvin would stay on the defense. We'll see. Man, a lot of injuries in that secondary is a big part of it. What does Dan Campbell do next year? Do you keep John Morton? I don't see that happening. Does he call plays again next season? I don't think anything has been decided on that side of the ball at all. Mentioned Zach Taylor, Joe Burrow in his prime. I think that's a huge part of that equation, but that's just the way they operate there. We could do this for the entire show, guys. Okay, let's get to Tua and Mike McDaniel. I'll just go through some of these other ones quick, and if you have head coaching stuff, we can always get back. Is Kyle Shanahan out if they don't make the Super Bowl? No, Kyle's one of the best coaches in football. He could clearly win Coach of the Year this year with the injuries. Tua, this is the part I wanted to get to. We all know about the contract. We all know about $99 million in dead money if they cut him. There's probably a greater chance, to my understanding, of them trying to trade him, eat up some of that money, and see if they can trade him away. I think that everybody doesn't think that that's the same likelihood or that's the same number one option, but some people clearly do believe that's the case. If they divide this up, it'd be $67.4 million in 2026 and $31.8 million in 2027. Now, $85 million was the highest number. That was Russell Wilson. The Broncos are still paying the latter part of that as they split it up as well this season. But I was brought to my attention with the increase in the salary cap, the percentage of that $99 million over this season and next season, if Tua is cut, is actually a smaller percentage of the cap than Russell Wilson's was. So that's something to kind of keep an eye on as we've seen Denver rebuild this thing very quickly, eating that dead money. A lot of people do believe that Tua's time in Miami has come to a close. Now for Mike McDaniel, the people I talked to around the league, they still believe that Mike has a greater chance of staying as opposed to leaving. The last 2 weeks have been terrible. Anything can change down the stretch, but I do think Stephen Ross kind of wants to keep him in place in some capacity if he can keep him as that head coach as they look for their new general manager. We'll see. Anything can change, but people around the league I talk to still do believe there's a greater chance that Mike stays. But we'll see what ends up happening. Again, the final stretch is everything. I've been told he hasn't lost the locker room. I'm told some changes in terms of what say he has in roster would possibly change, but it looks like a greater chance to stay. All right, injuries. Lamar, we're going to keep an eye on this big time because obviously they're hanging on by a thread. Takes a knee to the back. It's just been a brutal year with the hamstring and the knee and the ankle and the toe, and add the back to it as well. He wasn't moving around really well in the locker room if you ask anybody that was in there. I think that causes some concern. They play on Saturday, so it's going to be a little bit of a shorter week. I think that causes some concern. It would be Snoop, obviously, if he can't go. And this is just man, with what's gone on with the AFC, if he was playing like we've seen Lamar every other year, you'd be thinking this is a legitimate Super Bowl contender, but he just hasn't been able to stay healthy. It's day to day. It's more like just a bruise in his back from that knee. But with Lamar, you never know. It's always different. It just is. Josh Allen got the X-ray. He's fine. Just wanted to point that out. He did get the X-ray at halftime. He is fine. Quinshon Judkins, this was one of the bigger bummers of this past weekend. Dislocated ankle, fractured leg. He is going to have surgery. This is like a 4 or 5 month recovery. So he should be back for the start of the season and the part of that really, really good class. Gardner Minshew gets the ACL. It's just, I think that game showed you once again how good Patrick Mahomes is and where the Chiefs are and what they need to change offensively. The X-ray on J.J. McCarthy on the right hand. Further tests could be coming, to my understanding, but no break in there or anything. We'll see where J.J.'s at, but man, he's also a guy that needs to get on the field. But the knee last year and then the ankle this year and then it's a lot of different stuff. The two coaches I wanted to keep an eye on and where we're at. I mean, I love the chat right here. Is Dart safe as QB1? I mean, Dart needs to keep himself safe as QB1. I think that's a big part of it. Any word on Sauce? We can get to that in a sec. Jordan Love, concussion status. Jordan, we're going to see if he can practice in some capacity this week. That's a big, big deal. We'll see if he can. I'm not sure if he fully can. All right, some coaching rehires. These are two I want to keep an eye on. Matt Nagy is a big one. He did not sign a contract extension this offseason. Some people think he could be the predecessor to Andy Reid down the line. If he moves, does that tell us something about Andy and how long he wants to continue in Kansas City? I just think Nagy is in this head coaching cycle. I think a lot of people think his second time around he'll be better than the first time in Chicago, where I believe he did win a Coach of the Year. But I've spoken to him about everything he's learned from that first go of it in Chicago and how different he would be. I definitely think he'll have some interviews, but we'll see if they end up making some changes there in Kansas City if Nagy ends up moving on, or maybe that tells us something about Andy Reid. Brian Flores is the other one I'd keep an eye on. Obviously, he has a more complicated situation, but they'd like to bring him back as the defensive coordinator there in Minnesota, and we'll see what ends up happening. Like I mentioned, Andy Reid, could he retire? No, I don't think it's happening, but I did ask Copilot, because I skipped this earlier and I wanted to get back to it with the coaches. I did ask Copilot, we asked Copilot how many NFL head coaches were fired by year in 2021. And this is what we found. 9 head coaches in 2021, 2020 to 2021, 21 to 22, 13 head coaches. That was the highest turnover. 8 head coaches, 23, 24. 24, 25, we had 7. And this year, 25, 26, we have 2 so far. The average is about 5 almost every year. So that's where it stands with all the names I was throwing out there. There's always one surprise, but that's kind of where things usually are. With the playoff push. Let's get to this in a second, and then I want to get back to the chat because I know you guys got a lot of questions about coaches, and we'll get to that. Will the Giants draft Mendoza? I don't see that happening. I think Giants have a very good spot near the top that you can use that if anybody needs a quarterback. It's always a great spot to be. The AFC is bonkers right now. The Broncos do control their own fate. I was at that game. They lose to the Jaguars. If they win their final 2 games, they get the number 1 seed and win the AFC. There's a scenario to where if the Chargers beat the Texans this week, and the Broncos and Chargers game could be for all the marbles if Denver slips up. And then the Jaguars, after that game, they were still talking about the chance of the 1 seed. They legitimately do have a chance at the 1 seed. I believe it's if they win out and they just have the Colts and the Titans, with both teams that are kind of down right now, and Denver loses a game and New England loses a game, they can get the 1 seed, even though they haven't clinched the AFC South just yet because Houston's still on their heels, and Houston still has a chance to win the AFC South by winning out, and I think they very much can. I think they're a very dangerous team. So the AFC could have a lot going down. Also, tonight ties into it. If the Colts lose to the 49ers tonight, that would put the Chargers and the Bills locked into the postseason. They're right there on the doorstep, but if the Colts lose, both those teams get in tonight and get a postseason spot. The Bills can still win their division as well, so the Chargers can still win the West. A lot of seeding still to be determined in how these last couple of weeks go. The NFC, a little bit more locked in. You have the Seahawks, Bears, Eagles, Rams, Niners that are already in. So there's 2 spots left, but one of those spots has to either go to the Panthers or the Bucks. And now the Panthers obviously have a little bit of a lead there, and we'll see how these last 2 weeks go, and they could be playing for the division in the final game. So that would lock up 1 spot. So there's a wild card for one other team in the NFC. It could be um, it could be the Packers. They have a very decent chance of landing that spot. They need to win one of their final two games, and they're in the postseason, or have the Lions lose one of their final two games. So they could see the Lions lose before they even play Week 17, which really could help them out in the Jordan Love situation with the concussion. Malik Willis is injured with the throwing shoulder. That would be best case scenario for where Green Bay stands right now. Love is, from my understanding, doing better, quote unquote. You still have all the barometers you have to pass um, to get through. Now they're doing a Saturday to Saturday, so it's essentially the same time frame. It's not like it's a shorter week or extra time. We'll see. It was wild. I looked it up. He's never been diagnosed with a concussion in his career, so we'll see what ends up happening. Everyone is different. Every concussion is different, and we'll see what happens. The Lions, after that fall, I just want to mention, technically not out of it. They have a 6% chance of getting in. Their only path forward would be if the Packers lose out. Then be to the Ravens and the Vikings, and then it also require the Lions to do something they haven't done in 3 months, which is win consecutive games. So that's where they're at right now. I wanted to fly through those because it feels like you guys have a lot of questions about the coaches. So we're going to spend the last several minutes and what's going on. Brandon Ayuk done in San Francisco? Yes, he is 100% done. However, they decide to do that this offseason is going to be the interesting part. Can they trade him? Will they cut him? Will they split the post June 1st release, and they split the dead money of about $30 million between 2 years? We'll see. It's pretty cut and dry, though. Whether they trade him, whether they release him, they're on the hook for about $30 million in dead money, no matter what. What else do we have here? Uh, Whoever's asking the Giants for Mendoza must be brain dead. Oh boy, that's a hot one. Do you like the Jets' future? Aaron Glenn's going to be staying there. What I do like is they put it all on themselves. Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji. Essentially this. We're going to trade Quinn Williams. We're going to trade Sauce Gardner. We're going to make all of these different moves. We're going to acquire all of this capital, and we're going to rebuild this thing from scratch. Now, will that work? TBD. We'll see what they do with all of these draft picks over the next 2 years. I think they've set themselves up very good with the picks, though, specifically with the purpose of putting picks in 2027, which is something that they did very consciously, to my understanding, because of that 2027 quarterback class. That is, in all accounts, going to be much better than this 2026 quarterback class. So I do think with the capital that Darren Muji and Aaron Glenn have acquired, I do think there's an ability to build this thing up the right way. You just got to hit on these draft picks, and we just don't know if that's going to happen just yet. Eberflus out in Dallas. I do think when things start getting evaluated and changed, I think you start trying to figure out exactly what works best. I would say this, and what Eberflus works best with is a really, really good D tackles in the middle of his defensive line. He's actually more successful with those type of players than edge guys. I think they have a really, really good D tackle group. Were they banged up and not very good as a defense? I mean, historically bad in the first half of the season, certainly. But I don't think it's cut and dry that he's out. I do think it's something that they're going to evaluate, but I do think Brian Schottenheimer did a really, really good year. Matt LaFleur safe. I mean, that's a great one. I want to say this. Again, talking to all these coaches, hey, are you getting any looks? What are you doing in terms of somebody you'd like to team up with? All these conversations. Every single person that's a coach that I've talked to has said, if Matt LaFleur is out in Green Bay, that is just absolutely crazy. Like, that's just nuts. That's the way all these coaches think. I would say this. I do not think it's completely out of the realm of possibility. I think Matt is a great coach, but I think we have somebody, again, new in charge, and Ed Policy's running things there. Did not give him a contract extension before the start of the season, and I think everything is getting looked at there by Ed, and he's got a fresh set of eyes. I do think Matt would be maybe even above Kevin Stefanski in terms of, if he was available, teams that would jump at him. And teams, if he became available, would maybe think twice about keeping their coach as opposed to parting ways with their coach. I think that's part of what this process is. And that's why I mentioned at the top of the show. If some of these guys become available, some teams might reevaluate. Right now, they might be looking at it going, well, if we get rid of our guy, who's better that's available that we can get? Well, if Matt LaFleur is available, if Kevin Stefanski is available, maybe the evaluation process is a little bit different in some of these organizations. So that's where I stand on LaFleur. It's just really, really wild. And all the coaches that I talked to over the last week, that if he becomes available, they think it would be completely insane. Should Denver in the offseason look for a better RB1 or Let Harvey be one for and try and keep Dobbins. Dobbins' injury history has just been brutal. They did get him pennies on the dollar. RJ was going to be the future. I think we've seen him be a really, really good back. I was talking to some people there this past week, and I said, "Hey, is he starting to see it between the tackles better?" And they were actually like, "No, man, he's actually always seen it. It's just when we run him from the gun, he's not used to it. It's just formations have been different. It's getting him comfortable. He is seeing it. It's just getting him comfortable. They really, really like Harvey." Um, about KOC in Minnesota, he's been up and down. Good regular season for 2 seasons, no playoff wins. I think you have a group that's new. You have, this is a first-time general manager, a first-time head coach when they got, linked together. I think everybody thinks the world of Kevin. I do think Kevin O'Connell put all their eggs with an older roster and spent in the trenches and really tried to do a lot to insulate a young quarterback that has not played well. They put all their eggs in the JJ McCarthy basket. I don't think he's in danger of losing his job per se, but it did not go the way that they wanted to this year at all. They're really seeing if most of the growth a quarterback can make, I'm always told, is happens in the offseason, not during the season. Um, and I think that's what they need to see. What's the trade package for the Giants get for the first pick? That hasn't been established yet, but I'll say this as we're almost out of time. I love that you guys are answering so many questions. This is awesome. Um, the packages are only slated by what the desire is to come and get the prospect. Right now, this is like a mediocre group of quarterbacks, and you're always going to give up more for a quarterback to come up. Now, this is one piece of the puzzle. Wait until the evaluations happen, and the visits happen, and the combine, and the personal throwing sessions. Somebody could really skyrocket, and there's more aggression. More aggression in competing teams looking for a quarterback will drive the price up. Who do the Raiders get at number one? I think that's still undetermined, but obviously quarterback is just a massive, massive need in what they have. What's the update on Raheem Morris? I kind of mentioned it's definitely leaning more towards, in a lot of people around the league's eyes, not in Atlanta. I'm just saying the coaches I talk to around the league, there's a greater chance he's out than if he stays. What do we got? What else do we got? Address. Yeah, we addressed Glenn. Um, Man, you got a lot in here. I'm trying to stay a little longer, see if we can do this. Who's the next Raiders head coach if they fire Pete? Um, that's the hard part about this cycle, right? There's no locked in type of coaches, which is why the teams that are looking to part ways with their head coach potentially are keeping one eye on all those names I mentioned. If any of those veteran head coaches just become available, that changes the course of this entire thing. And I think the bidding war kind of starts. Where else are we at? What else we got? We got a lot of Pete stuff. Eberflus out now. We got that. Like just future did that. John Harbaugh, we've done that. Guys, I think we've done most of this. Should the 49ers, what was that? Should the 49ers, every time a new one comes, fire Todd Bowles? Yeah, there's a lot of those in here. That's wild. Um, yeah, bunch of dumb questions on the Giants here. Seahawks hosted the Raiders on that host the Raiders on that genius trade. I'll close with this because we've gone pretty long here. John Schneider should win Executive of the Year up there in Seattle. If you look at them making the decision to move on from DK Metcalf, which, by the way, wild situation, punching a fan, and picking Jackson Smith-Njigba to be the guy and seeing it before everybody else saw it and doing the deal in terms of contract-wise for Sam Darnold and making the draft picks he's had over the last couple of seasons, which have been outstanding, and moving on from Geno at exactly the right time and moving on from Russell Wilson at the exact right time, getting Mike McDonald in there, who's been an outstanding head coach already, finding Clint Kubiak and replacing the issue on the offensive side of the ball very quickly. John Schneider's an outstanding general manager in Seattle. He's done a brilliant job with the way that team has been built. He should win Executive of the Year. They're really, really good in the trenches, and I think we saw Sam Darnold kind of get a monkey off his back, and they're a very dangerous team come playoff time. So everybody, appreciate all your questions. Appreciate everything that you said in there, and even the hilarious ones that made me laugh, and some of them I couldn't read out loud. Have a wonderful holiday. I will be back on Tuesday to give you more, and hopefully we'll be a little further down the pipe with these playoffs and where we stand with some of these head coaching situations. All right, everybody, have a wonderful holiday. Take it easy.